Hey everyone, just want to encourage you to find us on your listening platform and give us a rating. Anywhere you listen to that has a rating system, go on over and give us a rating and maybe leave us a review. Let us know your thoughts. These ratings really do help. Thank you so much for listening. On to this week's episode. Welcome to another episode of Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals, where we're going to do a very loose, soft reboot kind of episode. And we're going to talk about probably going to be the second biggest movie of the year, Black Panthers, the sequel, the long-awaited one, and how the hell are they going to do it one, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And this is going to be a good one, too, because we do have a special guest on, so stay tuned to hear from her. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Rolando.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
An original podcast
about unoriginality. Sweet. I think we actually got that in sync this time.
I think so too, yeah.
It's like the biggest struggle. So, like I said, we have a guest, and for the third time this year, we are pleased to have MacKenzie Green on the show.
Hello,
MacKenzie.
I don't know if I'm the first three-peat, but I'm going to pretend I am. And
You are definitely the first three-peat.
The first three-peat.
I like how I've just inserted myself into the show and no one asked for it, but I frequently will end our previous recordings being like, so I'll be back for blank. And then like, it's just like, oh, okay.
We welcome it. Like, we'd be lying if we said we weren't excited to have this episode.
Yeah,
it was after the Jurassic World episode where we were like, so when you coming back?
Yeah, I literally was like, I'll be back for, and then like, you know, it says a lot when like, I'm literally watching the like Little Mermaid trailer and I'm just DMing Rolando on the side being like, so I'll be back on the show.
Oh yeah, no, I can't so wait. Excited. I'm trying to interview some of those Black parents who film their kids reacting to their kids watching the trailer for the first time, because like I think those I'm trying to get like a collection of some of those interviews for that episode. Like insert, because like I cried. I sobbed when I saw those.
I sobbed. The first thing I did, I looked for an old picture of myself from Halloween wearing a very ratty, ugly red Party City Halloween wig with like this mermaid, because I remember the whole night people were like, what are you supposed to be? And in my head I was like, are you guys blind? I have red hair, a seashell bra, and fins. Like, I'm clearly the Little Mermaid. And I just remember, like, again, off of the, like, children get it and adults don't. I remember kids being like, you're the Little Mermaid. And adults are like, who are you supposed to be? And it's like, who do you think? And now I'm so excited for all the little brown and black girls that no longer have to get the, who are you supposed to be?
Yeah, totally, for sure. And actually, that kind of reminds me of the story that while watching this film actually kind of like just reminded me again.
Oh my gosh.
It's just one thing. No. It's this thing. It's just like, I didn't realize how important it is to see like kind of your own representation on screen. Because like, I know that, for example, Black Panther was a huge moment for the Black community, obviously. Yeah. And I knew that. What's it called? Same thing for Shang-Chi, for the Asian community, to see themselves in the superhero form. To see kind of relate with a Hispanic character and see not necessarily my background, but like I'm Hispanic and stuff, so seeing that reference, it kind of did spark something in me that was just like, oh, this is awesome. And it just reminded me of this one time when I was a kid. I was convinced that I was going to be like Batman when I grow up. I was convinced I was going to be Batman on screen, right? And there's like an age when it hits you where it's just like, oh wait, I can't be Batman. I was fat. But B, I'm Hispanic.
When you look in the mirror and
that's
you're
it.
Like, oh.
I don't look like Bruce Wayne. I would never be Bruce Wayne. And it's just like, it's kind of refreshing with like movies like, you know, the upcoming Little Mermaid. It's just like, that's not the case anymore. And I'm like, that's great. What a world to be a part of right now. You know
what's wild? And I always think like, because I have to keep reminding myself of this, right, as I'm watching the movie, where I was like, wow, M'Baku is what Black women wish Black men would be to them. Or I'm like, oh my God, Namor, like how I'm like, we all gotta zoom out for a second and give props to Ryan Coogler, who basically said, all right, Kevin Feige, I have the binder full of characters. I'm gonna take Namor, I'm gonna change his entire origin, and I'm going like, because somebody had this great example where they said, like, it's this idea of when you get to the top, you pull the ladder up behind you is like what we're all so accustomed to is like what progress is. And this idea that Ryan Coogler, like you said, made one of the biggest movies in the world, had so much inclusion, was like allowed Black people to see themselves in this like fantastical realm. And then they went, all right, you get a second movie. What do you want to do? And he was like, I'm bringing the Mexicans with me this time. And everybody was like, wait, what? And he was like, and the indigenous people. Hold my beer real quick. I'm going to go rewrite this entire origin story of Namor. And I'm going to make him, it's like, again, it is seared in my brain till the day I die. I will literally be repeating, his people do not call him general or king. They call him Kun Khan. I mean, I will live and die by that being one of the greatest lines in Marvel
They put that
cinema.
in the trailer too. When I saw the movie, I was like, that was in the trailer. Like it stuck out. Just to take it back to Ryan Coogler, who's the filmmaker of this, he's got a really impressive filmography. He's made less than 5 films, right?
Yeah.
He made Fruitvale Station. Fruitvale Station in 2013. Really short, impressive independent movie.
That's
that
one
got
with,
him.
Michael
B. Jordan is in it. Yeah, Michael B. Jordan's in practically
It is the
everything he
most
does.
staggering movie. Like, to think about watching that movie and now where we are and where he was by the time he was making, I'm just like, wow.
And
everybody should watch
movies
that.
weren't kind of like being made like that as like recent as 2013, which is insane. That gave him the leverage to make a big project like Creed. He made the first Creed.
Oh, did
which
he?
is the big revival of the Rocky thing. Yeah, which is just a clever and really, really good film.
Yeah. Full
and
disclosure,
then
I haven't
he got
seen
Black
it yet.
Panther.
Oh my God, you gotta see. You want to talk about a movie that will break me down? Snot and cry through that movie in a way that like no movie. Like I thought I cried hard in Endgame. You want to see me lose my mind? Sit next to me while I'm watching Creed.
Yeah,
it was kind of like
to-do list.
It led to Cobra Kai too. It's like, all right, let's go to the next generation, and like look at now. Let's like switch things around. Now Rocky's the teacher and all this stuff. So really clever. And then he did Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So it's just like, wow, Ryan Coogler, way to like the most impressive CV ever.
I feel like he also is probably one of your people, Nicole, in the fact that like I don't know if you've seen interviews, but he is such a lover of film and TV. In a way that when he sits with these people and they're like, okay, so tell me what the inspiration was. And he will get as like granular as like, what did somebody say? They were like, what was the inspiration? He was like, Fargo season 2. And the woman was like, oh, it's a Fargo. And he was like, no, Fargo season 2. He was like, Atlantis, the animated movie from Disney. Like he started like listing these references that you could tell the woman was like, oh. Okay. Like
no, yeah. Especially when I saw this film last night. I saw it last night in a huge theater, and I just got kind of like taken aback by the grandiosity of it. I was like, this man loves cinema, which I think is also just another thing added to it. But wait, let's take a step back, we're gonna really talk about Wakanda Forever. But I want to hear your guys' stories of when you first saw Black Panther back in 2018. MacKenzie, you go first.
Oh my God! So I already was like a Marvel fan, right? And then Civil War happens and I'm like, what? And I was definitely a Marvel fan in the sense that like when you were talking, Rolando, about representation, I love the X-Men because that was like, I was like, Storm, she's like me.
Right.
Halle Berry does not look like the character, but we love what we can get. And all of a sudden there was this man in this suit and I was like, what is this? And people were like, well, he has a movie coming in a few years. And I remember going to see that movie and I remember like kind of being in shock almost, like just from like the black women on screen, the dark skinned black women on screen and the fact that they were speaking in Tosa on camera and like all this stuff. And it was blowing my mind. And I remember when Danae Guerra ripped off the wig, like I don't think people understand the conversations around black women and their hair. It was something about her ripping the wig off and throwing it at somebody. And then for her to be on top of that car in this red. And I just remember being very like sitting there, very silent through the whole thing by myself. I was living in New York, going to grad school. And I remember the movie ends and Kendrick Lamar and SZA started saying, and I just wept, just sobbed. And I remember this black couple walking past me being like, same sis, same. And I was just, I couldn't get myself to get, it was like I had been fine the whole movie. I was just kind of like, huh. And then it was just like, it all hit me at one time and I couldn't catch my breath because I had never seen something like that. And I think I also felt this like extreme excitement for myself. Like you said, Rolando, it's like I dreamt of being James Bond. Like I remember being like, I'm going to be James Bond. Then somebody was like, well, no, you're going to be a Bond girl. And I was like,
Oh my God.
What? Yeah. And then people were kind of like, I don't know, you're going to be a Bond girl. And again, thank the Lord for Halle Berry. But it was like, I just kept being like, well, why can't? And it was for some reason, all of a sudden, my brain went from like wanting to be James Bond, wanting to be Batman, wanting to be all these other people to all of a sudden, I just wanted to be a Dora Milaje. Just like in that moment, I was like, y'all can't tell me shit. And it was just, and that was my entire experience was just, I left that theater with so much pride. And I couldn't even put it into words. And you know when people were like, it's a fictional place, it's not real. It was like, yeah, I know that. You know, it was, and I think knowing what the diaspora has done to Black people, it like gave those of us who always wished we knew where we were from, like this land to pretend we were from. And I lived in Harlem, so like, you can only imagine how many Wakanda Forever salutes you gave each other on a daily basis getting to and from the south. It was wild. Like, what a time to be alive during that movie.
Yeah.
Rolando?
Yeah. I mean, see, I wish... So, that's kind of more or less the feeling I got when I saw Namor, I guess, on screen.
Yeah.
It was like this weird... It was just like, oh my God, like, they're like acknowledging my existence, but like in a way that felt authentic to the story.
Yeah.
It didn't felt like but when I saw Black Panther, like I think I saw it opening weekend and stuff, and I was just like in it because Nicole knows this, I do enjoy going to the Marvel movies because they are the movie equivalents of like a television program, which is why I think that this is should be considered like a soft reboot for sure. It changes the dynamics of like the usual template of the Marvel movies, right? But yeah, no, when I saw Black Panther, I was just like blown away. First and foremost by Angela Bassett, who just doesn't age. No. She's a goddess. I know we all praise J-Lo, rightfully so, but like Angela Bassett is in her 60s, all right, and she is stunning. You know,
stunning,
absolutely stunning. The cast was just so great, and I think it was just like for me it was the first time I may have seen like Africa being portrayed in such a futuristic way that like you just don't see in media. Yep. And I think that was just like a realization. It's just like, wow, like what a moment like for cinema.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I remember around like 2012, 2013, I started getting superhero fatigue and I just checked out with a lot of those movies. But I remember I was in grad school, and I don't know if you were still in the program with me, Rolando, in early 2018.
No, I would have been out already, but...
I had heard about the Marvel movies, obviously, because, you know, I pay attention to the world. But, like, the dialogue around Black Panther was different. And I remember my professor even had this whole class, or part of a class, where he was talking about it. And he had this whole conversation. So I was like, I guess I got to see this movie now, because it was different. And it took me a while. But when I did see the movie, I think that there were a couple things that I wasn't prepared for. You know, in other ways, I'm like, it's just a superhero movie at the end of the day. But the character of Killmonger, I actually thought was my favorite part of it. Yeah. And kind of like the dialogue that the film creates with you around him. I do think that they made him too one note, but I thought that he was probably my favorite villain I've ever seen in a film because I understood him. I understood his frustrations and I understood where he was coming from. And I thought that putting that as kind of like the mirror against, you know, this perfect, beautiful world of Wakanda was so interesting. Mm-hmm. Again, I think they made him too one note, but, you know, like it was, to me, I was like, wow, what a fascinating dialogue to have in a superhero movie.
Can I say that my favorite, so this is where I'm always like, I appreciate Ryan Coogler, right? Because when we were saying like Shang-Chi has notes where it's like, the three of us won't get it, but somebody who's Asian American is going to watch them and be like specific. So like where a lot of people are like, oh, Killmonger feels very one note. I'm like, Killmonger is every hotep I've ever had a conversation with in my life. Yeah. And I think that's what I love is like, ultimately, he and Nakia are saying the exact same thing through the whole movie, right? Like, they're both making the same arguments, but Killmonger makes it from a very hotep perspective. And so, like, what made me always love that character is because he's such a villain. And because, again, it's that conversation of, like, fiction can get you to zoom out more than real life. Because, like, people I knew that consider themselves to be, like, the most, like, pro-black, thoughtful people were like, Killmonger's got a point. And I was like, well, why doesn't Nakia have a point? And they're like, well, I don't know. I just appreciate Killmonger's thought around it. And I was like, so can we admit that you actually are fighting for the same kind of supremacy that we're trying to fight against as when Nakia is thinking about, like, how do we move forward? Like, it was just, it created these interesting dialogues I got to have with people who previously acted like, I have never aligned with the thoughts of a 5%er of a Hotep ever. And then they'd be like, well, Killmonger has a point. And I'd be like, no, what are you doing? And so it's like, and I loved that he also is, like, rooted in this person that comes from such a traditional patriarchal way of viewing blackness that there is something, we'll get to it later, but there's something so powerful about where he drops in that movie and his idea of what power looks like, as we're like, you've got T'Challa, who is fine having the queen as his advisor, fine being surrounded by female warriors, like all this kind of stuff that you're just like, this is what we talk, like, this is what we as black folks talk about when we talk about, like, what is a black man that is thinking of his community, and almost watching the split still where people are like, Killmonger was right. And I'm like, you still want to stand by that? You still want to 10 toes down that whole thought process? I just thought that was the most brilliant part of the character, is that Ryan Coogler clearly spent enough time in the barbershop with the specific kind of guy that he was like, oh, I know who Eric Killmonger is. I know him all day, every day.
Yeah.
I think Killmonger... I think Killmonger tapped to, like, a rage that minority groups were feeling at the time, because this is, like, very, very soon after Trump took office. I mean, I remember in grad school, our grad program was made up of predominantly majority people. Of course, not the one white kid, but one of the few white kids that was there, the smug look on his face when, like, Trump took office.
Yes.
Oh my God,
it felt like water, like, slapping us, because it's just like, you know the horrible things he said about, like, our group, right?
But you know what the most wild Killmonger line, which I feel like everybody pauses at, is when he turns to T'Challa and he's like, my people were in chains, and where were you guys? And it's like, and that isn't like, and again, living in Harlem, going to see that, the whole theater was like, it was like the collective wonder of, like, yeah, it's like, if this great savior existed, would it have come to look for all of us and to save us? Or would we be where we are right now, being like, so you mean to tell me there was a magical land where y'all could have which is, like, where we get into the Namor part of it, right? Is like, it's the response of, you saw your people suffering, now what was the answer? And Homeboy took a whole different route.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's so, I think just the thing about it is that the conversations can happen after repeat viewings, and it doesn't stop. You know, the film doesn't just kind of, like, hand everything over to you and says, well, that was that. I hope you enjoyed yourself. There's new things that you can keep grabbing from it, and different perspectives you can take on repeat watchings. Yeah. So, and then it obviously, I mean, do you guys actually remember, you know, when we lost Chadwick Boseman, and it was like, oh my gosh, just put a dent in everything. What year was that? Was that 2020, 2019? I
believe it was 2020. Wow. I remember thinking it was fake. I remember thinking like that was a whole. I remember being like, "Well, that's really rude, guys. Like, you shouldn't start these celebrity death hoaxes.
Rumors,
like, they're like they're not funny." And I've seen a lot of conversation around people being like, "I don't know why they had to." Obviously, we're getting to the film, and I don't follow rules, but like people being like, "Why'd they have to memorialize and like bury the character on screen?" And it's like, I think people forget that he's not just Black Panther. He's Jackie Robinson. He's Thurgood Marshall. He's James Brown. Like, he's Mr. To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. Like, it's like, I don't think people understood, like, losing him felt like losing this kind of like hope and opportunity. And I think at the timing, right? It's like, you're in the streets marching for Black lives, and then you find out that this kind of symbol of boundless Black possibility is gone. It felt like, oh, okay, how much more are we gonna lose in 1 year? You know, and it it felt staggering. And then simultaneously, you feel kind of garbage of being like, what happens to the story, right? And it was like how we ended up here of like, is it a reboot? It's like, what even happens to the story? What
Right.
happens to the character? What happens to this idea?
Yeah, which I mean, I think those questions came up very, very early after his passing, and I think they're not unfair questions because this franchise. We're smack in the middle of like this franchise that like Marvel was kind of banking on. Like, I do think that they were going to make him more or less the face of the Marvel Cinematic Universe until his untimely death. Yeah. And then I think the other thing was how shocking it was because like the man had like cancer. You know what I mean?
And that, I think what's wild, because I've heard Martin Freeman talk about this, is that he says everybody always asks him, so none of you knew. And he was like, no. And he goes, the first question I asked Kevin Feige, like when we finally got on set and Feige came and all, he was like, so be honest with me. You guys knew something, didn't you? And he was like, we knew nothing. And I think it's also this idea of the character of a man, right? That here he is. He signs on for the gig knowing he has a terminal diagnosis and is like, all right, I'm going to do the best I can. Here we go. And it's like, and so it makes you almost zoom out when you've got simultaneously you're thinking about at the same time, no shade to them, but Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. being in contract negotiations and being like, do I want to continue on with this? Right. And you've got this man being like, I'm taking it day by day, baby. Like, I want to see this through as far as I can see it. And it just, I was saying this to my mom, like, when you listen to Letitia Wright talk about like how he kept trying to talk to her on set about what it means to be a movie star, what it means to run, it's like you realize the character was having these conversations of like a man has done wrong by his family if he does not prepare them for his death, all this stuff, and you realize like he was having these deep, thoughtful conversations and all this stuff because he knew this had a finite timeline, but simultaneously it also makes you like, this is the most meta movie ever made where it's like, here he is talking to all of them about like, well, this is how you would do what I do. And it's like, okay, well, we'll just find out when you get back. And it's like, no, or you got Ryan Coogler being like, I wrote the whole movie, got approval from Chadwick. And he was like, okay, but just like, think of it some other ways too. And then it's like, and now he's gone.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I guess to that point about what's it called? About like rethinking it, right? Because I think that's the thing about Marvel Cinematic Universe that why I gravitate towards it is that it ultimately does feel like a TV show. At the beginning of the movie, characters are one place. By the end, they're more or less in the same place. Like, some things change, but they are still they survive and they're on to fight the next bad guy. I think the only moments we get like big changes are the big event films.
Yep.
Yeah.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever had to do something different because they're just like, we lost our star and Disney said we're not replacing him. Rightfully so. Right? But they also kind of did say, it's just like, well, we're not going to replace him. I think there was already backlash of the thought of even being replaced, right? So they had to step in and say, no, we won't. So they had to really reformulate the idea of now what is Black Panther going forward. And that's why this kind of became like a soft reboot, because now we had to think. I mean, the first Black Panther, they burnt all the herbs. Oh, so it's just like, know. So it's just like,
magical coincidences that work to their advantage.
Yeah.
Because I kept saying, as the thing opened and she was like, I'm trying to remake the heart-shaped herb, I was like, oh, right. Killmonger did burn the entire field. And I was like, everybody better be thanking their lucky stars low-key that's something that they had at their advantage, was this idea of like, it got destroyed.
Of why he couldn't come back.
The
or why
same
couldn't
thing with
he
like
survive.
the idea that the blip existed, right? It's like all of Phase 4 has been introducing us to both like the comical sides of the blip ending and like the sad sides. And this idea that it hit me, oh, right. They had technically come to terms with his absence and rebuilt the country without him. And then all of a sudden, ta-da, he appeared post blip, and they have to be like, oh god, okay, well, we had already figured this out without you. And it's like, oh, and by the way, I got sick in the I just thought, I kept thinking, this has got to be one of the like you said, it always operates like a procedural. It's like, welcome back to the next episode, as where this really required everybody to be like, oh,
this is a brand new
plot that wasn't in Kevin Feige's master book that we now have to think through.
It was basically the Connors.
Yes.
It became the Connors.
It
on
became
ABC,
pretty much.
Yes,
Yeah.
it became like what was that? Not My Wife and Kids. Remember?
Yeah, 10 Simple Rules.
Yes,
8
10 Simple Rules. Where literally all of a sudden they were like, your father died in a car, and we were all like, oh right, because Belushi actually did die in real life, and now you guys it's just like, it's those things where all of a sudden you're like, oh,
you said
okay.
Belushi. It was John Ritter.
There you go, John Ritter. I cannot keep up with these people. But like, it was it's that wild thing where you're just like, you zoom out and you're like, whoa, you really had to, okay. Like you really have to figure out how to do justice to this and also do it in a way that's not like traumatizing for kids. Cause you know, 2020 was like children burying their, which need to talk to all the parents that thought that was a good idea to help their kids bury their T'Challa toys. That was a little much, parents.
That was a
little
thing?
much, just a little much.
Yes, it was all over my
didn't know
For You
that.
page, and I hated every second of it. And I was like, you guys have got to stop having funerals for Black Panther with your children. Just like, like chill out.
You were just, yeah.
Speaking
Well,
of
this
funerals.
film,
Oh wait, there's one quick thing. Where was Bucky for the funeral? Bucky should have been there.
Listen, the way I cussed Bucky Barnes out on my own Twitter feed when I was like, first and foremost, I hope they take your arm and the Thunderbolts again. How dare you?
disrespect.
Yes, I was like, Sam Wilson, where are you?
Yeah.
Sam, you would not be flying were it not for T'Challa and all of the people of Wakanda that made you those wings. You should have been there. Like, there's so many people that should have been at that funeral.
Totally.
I was so pissed.
Absolutely. Old Chris Evans should have been there.
Should have been there.
Like, yeah, sorry, Nicole. We got into that.
No,
Was
it's
like
okay.
a very
Yeah, this
deep,
is-
like Marvel
yeah,
Cinematic
Yeah,
Universe
I got
questions
very
that we
mad
had.
about this. I was like, Bucky, they rehabbed
But I was so
you.
mad.
They put you through
was just
therapy.
like, yo, Bucky, they gave you shelter.
Yes.
While you were a wanted felon. you know?
Rhodey, the only other black superhero in the group before half of these people, I was like, rude, disrespect that none of you would come. But then I was like, what did I expect from a bunch of coworkers that didn't go to Natasha's funeral? So here we are.
Fair point.
oh, she died.
That was also my response when it happened to the movie. I was like, oh no.
She didn't even get a funeral on screen, right? Like,
No.
that's the
In
other
Falcon and
thing.
Winter Soldier, they just, not Falcon. In Hawkeye, they just went, look, it's a plaque. And I went, all
Right. That's it.
Jeez. Well, I was going to say this movie had a lot riding on it. Not only, you know, how are we going to follow up after losing Chadwick, but then this latest phase, I feel like, has gotten people really mixed about Marvel. You know, it kind of like 2018 was such a strong year for Marvel, and obviously with closing out Avengers and introducing Black Panther, that they were at the height, and they just haven't. I don't know. They've been struggling. I feel like recently, at least from what I see. How do you guys feel about it?
I don't disagree. I think they have taken a couple big swings, right, at processing grief. That's been a huge one, which like there are some of the greatest filmmakers in the world who've not fully been able to figure out how to talk about the process of what grief really looks like, right?
Yeah.
And then they also tried to introduce us to this idea of like the new face of Marvel are women and people of color and different, you know, all different backgrounds. And like, and I think She-Hulk did this really well in the sense that like She-Hulk's entire premise was the villain is toxic fanboys, but it's like you almost could set your watch to the outrage, right? It's like Eternals happened and everybody's like, we're slow. And I'm like, have you watched a Chloe Zhao movie? You better be glad it was this fast.
And it was so beautiful. I mean, like
it was like
just such a
cinematically
gorgeous
stunning
movie.
I was like, just go with it. Just get into the gig. It doesn't, just go with it. And it's like, it's boring and slow and big giant props and there's an alien coming out of the earth and you haven't explained it. Guys, if the alien coming out of the earth is the part where you lose all hope, and I'm like, I don't know if you've missed it, but there's been a talking raccoon for the last few years that's got a whole fan base. Like the same thing with like Ms. Marvel. It's like, I think when we talk about this idea of like what Phase 4 has also done really well is the communities that things are made for, it speaks directly to them. And for everybody else outside of it, makes absolutely no sense. Like there are literal moments of Ms. Marvel where I was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't get it. And then I would have like South Asian friends that would be like, yes, Kamala, I get it. Okay, come on, Kamala, come through. And I'd be like, oh, okay, so I'm not supposed to know what's happening.
that one speaks to me because I know Jersey City so well, and I know the little area that they're trying to portray on screen, right?
What area is that?
The little India street.
Oh,
basically,
wow,
that's
okay.
what's it called? Like, it takes place in that like whole little district. She's
India,
Muslim
yeah.
though, but like it's like that whole like section of Jersey City by Journal Square.
Very cool. Oh,
And it's wonderful. I agree with Mick. I actually have been digging this phase of the Marvel universe. Like, I haven't had the complaint. I'm also not a white guy.
That's my thing. Is I keep being very clear where I'm like, I'm also not the audience that feels abandoned. So like,
exactly.
I've been.
But it's so interesting because as a person who's not engaged, I hear opinions of it, and the opinions that speak the loudest are of the straight white guys. At the end of the day, I mean. You know, at the end of the day, they're also the main demographic because they live and breathe this stuff. They buy the merchandise.
Exactly.
They incorporate it into their fashion. You know, like all straight white guys like to wear
Here's the thing.
shirts.
The hardest I've ever cried.
I mean,
you know, I'm a Disney dork up and down. And the hardest I've ever cried when I go to the park is when I see like a Muslim family coming to the park clearly for the first time being drugged by a daughter who is coming to see Miss Marvel. Or like, I remember being there the night that America Chavez was being introduced, and to literally see droves of Latino families like standing around and hearing like the dads be like, now how long is this going to be? And everybody's like, shut up, Dad. And they're like, do you know how much parking was? And they're like, shut up, Dad. And then to watch her come out with Doctor Strange and the crowd to lose it. It was like, or I've been there when like the little kid is in his Shang-Chi outfit and then Shang-Chi comes to the balcony and he's like, losing his mind. You know, it's like, that's the part that like, I laugh because I'm just like, oh, there are people now coming to this. In the same way when people say, where do I start with Marvel? I always go, oh, watch Civil War and pick who you like. Now my whole thing is like, if it's somebody who's like, I don't really get into this, I'm like, what's your vibe? Do you want like sapphic love affair? All right, let me direct you towards Carol Danvers. I'm like, or you can get into the love story between, you know, Io and one of the other Dora Milaje. I'm like, okay, what are you? You feel like you're misunderstood fangirl. Ms. Marvel is your vibe. Oh, you have tiger parents? Let me introduce you to Shang-Chi's dad. Like, I just instantly now I'm like, what is your trauma? I will introduce you to phase 4.
Are there any dyke superheroes? Because that's what I would like to watch.
There's definitely been like not Ms. Marvel. Carol Danvers is like
Carol. How
she's kind of
right?
coded
It's
to
like,
be. Yeah.
Okay.
She hasn't like come out yet, but I think Disney was too scared. I think they've been like dipping their toes
and then
little
you
by
know,
little.
Love and Thunder. The whole thing is Tessa Thompson's character is
the
king. She's the new king of Asgard, and she's looking for her queen. So she's constantly the whole movie is just getting drunk, talking about like what woman left her recently. And then this one, they have the nod, which again, like hats off to Ryan Coogler, because somebody asked him like, will we ever see somebody queer in Wakanda? And he's like, well, if colonizing never happens in Africa, there's no Christianity to tell you that there is a right or wrong sexuality. And he was like, so, I mean, I guess everybody is kind of vibing with whatever they into. And I was like, I love that answer that he's like, yeah, you know, colonized religion doesn't show up, we're all kind of just chill.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. Yeah.
All right, so I think it's about time we start talking about Wakanda Forever.
It.
I saw it last night. Did anyone see it opening night or
opening Thursday night?
You saw it Thursday night?
What was the energy?
Oh my God, everybody was confused. I went to a theater with a lot. So this is what I will say. I said this to my mom before we went. I said one of two things are going to happen. We're either going to go to a theater with a bunch of black people who have not seen anything since the last Black Panther and have no clue what's happening, or it's going to be other nerds like me. And my mom said, $10, it's the first one. And when we got there, I was the only one. Again, and my mom is in that category of like, who are these people? My mom is Issa Rae. I'm rooting for everybody black. Like when I told her Kang is an Ant-Man, she's like, I'll be an Ant-Man. When I'm like, Sam Wilson's the new Captain America, she's like, show me the last episode. Like she is not interested in it unless I'm like, Mom, there are black people in this. And she's like, okay, I'm coming. Okay. Now who's that? So like truly I was the one in the theater being like, oh, it's Valentina. Oh my God. He just
Valentina.
Every single person in the theater was like,
is that Julia Louis-Dreyfus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
Every single person in the theater was like just crying over T'Challa. And meanwhile, I was crying about all of it. I was like, I was having a full just meltdown. And then I was like, and those mutants, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
When did you see it, Rolando?
I saw it also last night. And it was a packed theater. Like, it was a 9 p.m.
Mine was
showing.
a packed theater, too.
It was a packed theater. And you know how I've been complaining about, like, how people have been rude in theaters? The movie started off, obviously, with the death of T'Challa. And it was dead quiet.
Dead silence.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
My theater
was
was
hear a pin
quiet.
drop.
Yeah, they didn't do the thing where like it starts off with a dun 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 dun. Dun. It just went right into it, and everyone was just like, "Shut up!"
Yeah,
not one person spoke. And I was just like, "Oh, finally!" Like people are showing respect in the theater again, because that's my biggest gripe with the theater going experience in the last year.
Absolutely. No, in the theater you're talking about, I had to actually approach people and tell them to shut the fuck up. So it's that theater in particular. Back when I used to go
those
there,
$7 tickets,
So the movie begins with the death of T'Challa, and it's told from the point of view of Shuri.
Yeah.
Because also this is her movie.
Yeah.
And, she's frantically fighting for a way to pretty much not make it so until, her mother, the queen, comes and lets her know that it's final. He's with the ancestors. Yeah. And then we visit, there's the funeral and everyone's grieving. And I forget what exactly is the transition, but then it goes into the Marvel logo, kind of the same one for Black Panther, but it's quiet.
And it's all Chadwick.
It's all Chadwick
of him.
Boseman, yeah.
And it's just showing all of these images from him, and it forms a Marvel logo. And again, in my theater too, it sounds like your theater, my theater, your theater, quiet. And it was just so fitting. And I think like the power of silence in that moment in a huge movie, has to be appreciated. They did it so well, because everyone felt it. And everyone knew too what it was there for.
I have to say one thing that they have done in Phase 4, obviously, Nicole, you aren't a part of our crazy cult, but they have played with the opening more than they ever have throughout this phase, right? So WandaVision, they would tailor it to the decade of the TV show, completely eliminating even that Marvel opening graphic altogether. In Ms. Marvel, there was a scene where they made it a full kind of like old school Bollywood black and white sepia tone with kind of the specific way we think of the music. Like Werewolves After Midnight After Dark, guys, there's a lot of stuff going on in Phase 4. They did it as black and white with like the horror vibe where it's like an animal slashing through the logo. So I think
like that.
It was interesting with this being the end of Phase 4, like you said, the silence, right? So they've played so much with every single phase and doing new stuff and changing the graphic it was like they closed the whole thing out by being like, want to know what the trick is this time? Nothing.
Oh, so this is the end of this phase.
Yeah, this is the end of this phase.
I didn't know that this was the end of Phase 4.
I told you I am lame.
I can't. No, I'm. Here we are in the Phase 5. I didn't think we would see a Phase 5. To be honest, not for lack of trying. It was more so just like I didn't think when they announced that there were going to be 3 phases of Marvel. I just assumed, okay, that's the end.
One of my friends said to me recently, like, "What's the end?" And I said, "There is no end. Like we are going to be in Phase 50. This is just going to. They're turning comic books into television and movies.
Now that Disney
Nicole's
owns them. Yeah, I guess so. Disney's never gonna let it die.
No,
they're gonna do animation revivals and remakes of all of them.
Oh, don't worry, that was called What If.
There's also,
there you go. There you go.
You know that X-Men is getting revived, right? The cartoon.
And Fantastic Four.
Oh wait, no, I'm talking about the cartoon from the 90s. It's also getting revived.
It's called X-Men 94.
And we're probably gonna have to cover that, obviously, because that's such a great cartoon.
Obviously, yeah.
Because you know what's wild too is I think about when you were saying like we start this with the death of Chadwick, right? So within Phase 4 there was a show called What If, and it was all these like what if scenarios. And the crazy part is Chadwick voiced those characters, so those were his last performances ever. And the crazy part is in every what if scenario, T'Challa had to die. And in every one of those, he gave like a speech. So when it was like, what if T'Challa became Star-Lord? He like gave a speech about life and death. It's like, what if T'Challa became a zombie in one of them? It's like he gave a conversation about like death not being the end. So I think there was, again, something really profound about not having his voice, not having any sound, and just go like that being like, and that's the final way of closing this out.
And also props to Ryan Coogler for not cheapening at any moment or exploiting his death.
I mean, I didn't know how he was going to do that, but it was just something about the running around and the like, what's the confidence rate and the way it felt and the claustrophobia of how he filmed it. And then just ending it with her, Angela Bassett silent, and then her just saying like, what is my brother's heart rate? It was just I don't think we give enough credit to Ryan Coogler. This man is so good at what he does, and like you said, it's like to be 5 movies in, I don't even understand it.
Yeah. So who wants to volunteer to kind of summarize what Wakanda Forever is about? Because it's a lot. Rolando, you're usually pretty good at
fine.
it.
I'll go with the short and condensed version. So we're dealing 1 year after the death of T'Challa, and the nations of the world have decided like, oh, this is our time to strike. Like we can get to the vibranium, and Queen Ramonda has to remind people, it's just like, you don't fuck with Wakanda. We're still here. Like we will protect ourselves if we have to. Basically what's happening is everyone on Earth wants some vibranium that is found deep within Wakanda. So now they're searching for vibranium elsewhere, and they discover part of it underneath the Atlantic Ocean. Surprise, it turns out to be Namor's actually, because Namor,
right?
Namor and his people of Talukan? Talukan, thank you. And he decides to go to Wakanda, gives them an ultimatum because he feels because they revealed their secrets to the world, now they're looking for vibranium, and he feels that because of T'Challa, they're responsible for this mess, so they have to like ally with them to like kind of protect them. The Wakandans don't really like this because Namor comes off very threatening, very imposing of his will here. So they hunt down a scientist who is the one who created the tools to find the vibranium. Shuri decides to protect her, gets kidnapped by Namor. I thought they were going to turn into a relationship. I don't think it's going to go.
I think everybody was rooting for that. I think everybody in my theater was like,
so hard.
Okay, go for it. That was me at least.
He's so sexy.
Don't even get me
started.
so
sexy. Oh my God. Can you believe one of the artists who drew Namor had the audacity to call him fat?
When I tell you he and Winston Duke in the same movie, when people talk about the male gaze versus the female gaze, like I know I make a lot of jokes about like Chris Evans is so hot. Let me be very clear with everybody listening to this show. I have crossed Chris Evans in the street and not realized it was Chris Evans. But let me tell you what, if I ever saw Tash Huerta or Mr. Winston Duke, I know I would stop and be like, hello. Please tell me more.
Winston Duke is a mountain of a man. Like, you won't miss him. Like,
you won't miss him.
He's so hot. Also, this whole cast is gorgeous.
It's upsetting when you watch a movie where you're like, everybody here is beautiful.
It's just so hot.
Can go to hell.
The princess is rescued and taken back to Wakanda. Namor follows, starts a skirmish with them, killing the queen, Angela Bassett. Ramonda is her name, right? Ramonda.
To this day, the coldest line I've ever heard in my life is,
when
Harry, you're dead. You're queen now.
You're queen now.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was so into him when they were like going to Talukan, and she was like, oh my God, it's the sun rising under the ocean. Only 15 minutes later for him to be like, and your mama's dead. Good luck.
I was distraught because I'm just like, Angela Bassett is giving performance, all right? Why are we stripping her?
My mom and I at least once a day yell over the balcony to each other. Have I not given you everything? And my dad, who still hasn't seen the movie, is like, what's happening? I wish I had gone with you guys. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can give any sort of dialogue to Angela Bassett and she'll just turn it into a tour de force.
Yeah, it's just, she just
has that ability as an actress. She's really
I've loved her. I think the first performance I remember her as a kid was What's Love Got to Do with It. It's just ever since then, I've been obsessed. So Shuri, as decides to work on, creating that heart herb.
Yeah.
And in the process becomes the Black Panther, the new Black Panther. It would be assumed that she would be the queen, but we'll get back to that a little later. And as the new Black Panther, her first, decree is we're going to go to war with Namor. And they kind of entrap Namor with a plan to subdue him. It turns into like this big fist fight, which is when I realized I don't think they're getting together, guys.
Yeah. I was like, I don't think this is gonna work out.
I don't think love wins here.
Yeah. I was really excited, but it wasn't.
I hope that we don't get a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
But at the end, when it came to the moment for Shuri to maybe kill Namor, she chose not to because she was actually being influenced by Killmonger. So Killmonger made an appearance, which I was just like,
tell you everybody's favorite Hotep came back, I was like, oh my God, he's really still here, and he's still just as hateful in death as he was in life.
He was playing that dark side of the Force there. He's just like, go kill. You want to. Like, go for it. And honestly, let's be very real. Like, I was, again, it's just like, he's right. Like, they killed Angela Bassett's character.
But that is the comedy of these movies, because Ryan Coogler is doing something bigger, right? He's not just talking about superhero stuff. He's talking about a bigger topic, which is like when you're watching this Mexican man and this black woman, and he literally says to her, so you think if they didn't have all that we have, they wouldn't come after us? Everybody in the theater was like, no, he's gonna pull it.
Yeah. So Shuri shows kindness to Namor. Namor retreats. They have kind of a forced alliance at this point now, and the big twist at the end is that Shuri discovers she has a nephew, Prince T'Challa, from Nakia. And,
is that what? Do you remember when Ramonda and Shuri are on the beach and she goes to Shuri, I have something I need to tell you about your brother. Yeah. But then that's when he comes. Do you think that's what she was going to say? Because I was like, they never got back to that.
I didn't think about that because I was already mad for Shuri because I'm just like, whoa. Like, a whole year has passed since he died, and not once did they think of like letting her know. I mean, she needed closure.
But it totally made sense though because when Nakia was talking and they were like, after Thanos' attack, like, you left us, was like a comment they made. And so I thought, oh, right, you find out you're pregnant and now all of a sudden like half the world gets dusted and you're like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I can't be around these people. Like, this is all too sad. I also want to say, again, props to Ryan Coogler, because I realized this is the first time I've seen a movie where Haiti is not shown as like this dark, scary voodoo place, and it's instead shown as this like vibrant place with all these resources, and that it's like this safe haven. So like I've also seen a lot of like Haitian people and Haitian American folks be like, finally a good representation, the start of a good representation of Haiti. So I thought that was really powerful too.
Just kind of breaking all of these like expectations that people have because of the way they're represented already. Which is just like, you don't realize it until you're watching it and you're like, oh, that went in a different way that I expected. And I can't believe that I even expected that. Like when they started, especially when they gave the backstory for the Talucan, which I thought was probably my favorite part of the movie.
That was
just stunning. Wonderful, stunning filmmaking. And, an interesting approach too. The only thing that didn't work for me was I didn't quite understand why he hated people on the land so much, because he didn't really have any interactions with them until he went to bury their mother, and they were just being idiots.
Well, like people on land always right? Are. It's like his mom had told him like the surface is, in a very like Little Mermaid way, right? It was like the surface is beautiful, it's wonderful, like everybody up there loves and supports each other. And
it could be that.
Yeah, and then he comes out of the water and they've got slaves and they're like, you're the devil, and he's like, wait a second. This is not what my mama told me about.
I guess if they had killed his mother, I would understand his absolute hatred and rage or something like that. But he just kind of went there to bury her after living very peacefully and was like, well, these people suck.
Yeah. Well, but
I thought it was such an extreme reaction.
He witnessed the people that look like him and his family being enslaved.
And then I will say, again, props to Ryan Coogler, because he was very clear that these are the Spaniards. Like, he was very clear of like, let me break it down for y'all. Like, there were so many subtle things in this that I was like, wow.
And the monstrosity.
I didn't realize that he was being hyped up about how great that.
He was being told it's like a wonderful place, and then he gets to land and he's like, why are my people in chains? And they're like, because they are. And he was like, guess who's gonna say otherwise? I'm burning your house down. And then they were like,
I felt nothing but anger when that last the priest of all people, right? He's just like, you're a demon without love. It's just like, are you
right?
Like
when you had just seen this man 30 seconds before standing there watching people get whipped, and he's like, you have no love in your heart. And he was like, all right, bitch, say less.
And I love the way they came up with the name, at least in this canon, how they came up with Namor. Like, si Namor, Namor, I think
I screamed.
I was like, I'm
Nobody around me screamed. I went, Ryan Coogler is a genius. I want him to get more things.
Mm-hmm. Do we know if he did he write the script?
Yeah, he wrote the script.
He wrote. Yeah, he's one of the writers.
He's one of the writers. Yeah. Okay, yeah, like wow,
right?
Props.
And then for them to be speaking like not just, but speaking Mayan. Like even the interviews I've seen with the actors when they're like, you would be very surprised how hard it is to learn an ancient dead language. And I was like, but then what was funny is like I've heard the actors say that they were like, the first time we got confronted with having to learn the Mayan, we were like, oh, this is like an old dead language. And the guy was like, literally the actor that was teaching these Mexican actors goes, well, a lot of you learn Latin, haven't you? And they were like, okay, we're going to shut up now and learn and learn this.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
And the whole world of Talucan, at first I was like, okay, there's another hidden world and they have their secret thing. Yeah. At first I was like, fine. But then as it went on, he got me more and more, even though they looked like they lived in Pandora.
I did want to point out the stark difference between this one and I'm not knocking Aquaman because I actually do like the Aquaman movie, but like this one had like a style that like Aquaman kind of just feels generic. In comparison,
Aquaman went very like they live under the water, so don't try to make sense of any of it.
Right.
As like, this was like, we're gonna explain why the sun is up, like why this is working.
It's Mesoamerican inspired.
Yes, it was like okay, thank you, because I love a good time as much as anybody, but I will take myself out of it very quickly, being like, what's happening? Right. How is Nicole Kidman Jason Momoa's mom? Explain that to me.
Well. It's the toxins in her face that make her look so youthful. So.
I know. I'm like, to this day, I'm like, y'all really tried it with that origin story. And then you'll have the nerve to be like, we don't know why people don't love the Warner Brothers interpretation of DC Comics. I wonder why.
I do want to point out one thing. There was a criticism that I saw on my TikTok from the Washington Post variant cover. I'm giving them a shout out because they do such a good job. They're great. But one of the things that they pointed out that's interesting was the city that they were inspired by has like a lot of Aztec and Mayan influences. They were kind of mixing cultures, and they're calling it out because like if you go to Thor, like that's strictly Norse culture. They don't mix in other cultures. So it's kind of like that was one critique that I had heard, and I think it's fair. But at the same time, it's just like, okay, but I've also not gotten anything like this at all. So like, let's baby steps.
It's the same way when people critiqued Black Panther where they were like, oh, everybody's got like a random African accent. And I was like, no, they specifically picked like Tosa for all the Wakandans. And then like the Jabari have like Nigerian accent. But it's like, but then I'm like you, I'm like, guys, let's also be really excited that we got this movie and
absolutely
not make Ryan Coogler feel bad.
yeah. No, totally. It's just like I think it's
I'm totally with you.
Fair
it's
to
like,
point it out.
Yeah, like it's a super fair point, and at the same time, it's like I can also assume that some of like the art team was probably like, well, let's mix all these kind of ancient cultures together since this is like a made up land and we want everybody to see, like, who knows.
Yep. Well, I guess to that point, the only time that I was like, oh wow, like I'm seeing a story here that I hadn't seen was the backstory. But then when you see the people who inhabit Talucan, they all look like from Avatar. They're blue. So like the only person
they're blue on the outside.
They're blue on the outside the water. Yeah. That was my favorite. Can I say my other favorite moment is when that cop on the bridge is like, is she blue? I was like, sir, you have way bigger problems in front of you about what the color of this woman's skin is. Now, I know this wasn't meant to be a joke, but for some reason that felt like such a good joke to me that this cop's first concern was like, what color is she?
What's
true. Happening
I didn't
here?
Even notice.
And it's like, sir, there's a whale behind you. There's a very large man in front of you.
And also, this is also the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, it's just like, haven't we seen
sir,
other things at this point?
You have seen an alien on the news make half the population disappear in your immediate question.
Like, yeah, like, why are you surprised it's a blue person? It's just like, this should be like, at this point, status quo.
Like, you've all heard of Ant-Man at this point. Why are you shocked by this?
So tell me about the scientist. Is she a character that was in any film?
Oh, that's right.
So Riri Williams in the comics is kind of like a protege of Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And my favorite part about Riri's backstory is that she's from the south side of Chicago, loses her parents to gun violence, and basically decides that she's going to create her own Iron Man suit to protect her neighborhood.
She's known as Ironheart.
Yes, as Ironheart. And because she's like this kid genius, she basically goes to MIT like 3 years early, created the suit and everything. But
Eddie gasped.
Yes.
Next to me when he saw it, just like, oh, it's Ironheart. And I was just like, I had no idea who he's talking about. Because he's a comic book reader. And I was like, who? And he's like, you'll see. And I was just like, oh, she made an Iron Man suit. That's so cool. Oh, Ironheart.
Yeah.
Got it.
I am really fascinated by the idea that like some of the smartest people in the MCU outside of Tony Stark, right? And we're living in a post Elon has bought Twitter and proven he's not a genius world. That there's something very joyful to me about this next generation in the MCU of like the smartest people in the galaxy are like, at least right now where we're established, are two young black girls.
It's true.
It's Shuri and it's Riri Williams, right? And it's like, and I find that to be very fun. And I thought that whole scene with her just felt like very like black women, because it's like they're arguing about makeup shades matching before they go into the room with her. Then when they're in there, she's screaming at them. Then she like says that great, she's like, to be young, gifted, and black, am I right? And even just that subtle touch of like her tech got stolen by the U.S. government. She didn't even know it was being used. Like, yeah. It's just that whole scene is just so funny to me, especially when she's like, oh my God, you're the princess. Oh my God. And I was like, oh, right. This is a world where this girl has now seen these people on television. Like,
yeah, she reacted how we all would, which would be just fangirly out.
I would lose my mind. Yeah, I would not be chill if like Shuri knocked on my door. I'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Hi.
I thought one of the most interesting scenes of the film too actually was when something happened to my favorite character, which is Okoye, and when Ramonda pretty much,
stripped her of her title.
Of her title. And it's all just because she is consumed by her grief. And it's interesting because this is a film essentially about what happens when you let negative things consume you. Yeah. And the kind of the drastic consequences of those emotions being so strong within you. And that scene, first of all, Angela Bassett, of course.
You want to talk about acting your ass off.
So, yeah. And it's like, that what she's doing is wrong, but she acts it so well that you completely understand why she's doing it.
I understood. I didn't disagree.
And the fight they were having where she was like, where everybody was like, well, Okoye gave up her husband and her life. And it's like, and you're like, yeah, well, you are right. And she's like, her husband, she could go see her husband right now. Like, she could go. And it's like, I have nothing because I've prioritized you all for so long. I just, I know people love to poo-poo and they're like, these aren't real movies. But I'm like, if Angela Bassett doesn't get something for that monologue, it's up there with me with like Viola Davis and Fences, where it's just, that there's a film student right now memorizing that entire monologue with the emotions and being like, I would like to perform Queen Ramonda from Black Panther 2.
I agree. I'm so glad you said that, MacKenzie, because I think me and Eddie came out of that saying like, she deserves a supporting actress nomination.
Yeah, no, I
for
think
sure
so.
for this role. I mean, it's not like it hadn't happened in superhero movies. Heath Ledger won his for a superhero movie.
Joaquin Phoenix won.
I still think
Joaquin Phoenix, best actor, no less.
What I think is funny is this movie makes a constant commentary on this idea of like what it's like to be a minority, right? Which is like you weirdly start fighting each other when in reality you're constantly having to acknowledge like we're not even each other's enemy. And I almost think there's something very poetic about whenever I tell people like, oh, Black Panther is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen and it should have won an Oscar. And I'm like, and you want to know what won that year?
Yeah,
Green Book. And I'm like, you want to know what lost? I was like, the fantastical idea of black women owning themselves and black men supporting them and wanting to run a country with inclusion and all. I'm like, and you want to know what won? Throwing chicken bones out the window of a car. And it's like, and I feel like there are moments in this movie that almost even acknowledge the absurdity of that, right? Like, here she is at the UN being like, where she is being questioned of like, well, how do we know we can trust you with vibranium? How do we know we can trust Wakanda? Meanwhile, as she's talking to them, then brings in the French, which we know are colonizers, and American soldiers, which we know are colonizers, to be like, so explain to me how we're the problem when I just plucked these people out of trying to steal stuff from us.
And that scene was also really like, it's such a simple scene. It was shot so great because there's a medium close up from the angle on, the French person and the United States person, but she's in a wide, but the camera's a little down and it's looking up on her.
Yes.
And so she has all this power. So you just feel the power of like, and she does that thing too where she looks to the side, she looks to the left, she looks to the right, and then she starts talking.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how to evoke power in the way you set up your shots and the way that you block it, Like, again, just Ryan Coogler.
Right? It's all roads lead back to Coogler. There we go.
Filmmaking here. I never thought we would talk filmmaking about a comic book movie. Well, not about a Marvel movie specifically.
But I'll be honest, I think
that's also an exception.
But that's where this is gone, though, right? It's like when it again, and I think Nicole, you probably speak to this. It's like if you get the right conductor, the right artist, it doesn't matter if it's a cartoon, if it's a comic book. They will make something that you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think he's one of the strongest actually filmmakers that MCU has. I mean, I was disappointed by the work that Joss Whedon was doing when he was making the films. He was phoning it in. And here's someone who has limitations, who has to
phoned it in.
I knows what to feel like.
The first one was good.
Yeah. But he has to follow the rules that Disney and stuff, the template that they give him, but then he's like, well, what can I do with this? And how can I make it my own?
I heard somebody once say with creativity, they were saying like this idea when we think about computer science, right? It's in the binary, and the real creativity comes with people who can take nothing more than 0 and 1 and make something amazing with it. And I feel like Ryan Coogler is when, sorry to Marty Scorsese, but when they say stuff like these movies are awful, I'm like, yeah, if you're phoning it in and you were just handed 0s and 1s, it's kind of like, that's a little formulaic. But when you hand somebody 0 and 1s that goes, okay, all right, I'm gonna do something cool. Then all of a sudden you're like you said, you're watching the movie going like, that is the most incredible camera angle to show power. And then you have to go to yourself, oh, right, this is a Marvel movie. I forgot for a second that we are in the middle of the same movie that shares a universe with Hawkeye.
Yeah. And actually, to that point, the Martin Scorsese thing, because it does still piss me off all the time. It's just like, it's like, whoa. Like, not for nothing, but like these studio blockbuster films are the backbone of the industry. They do fund all the smaller projects. And no one, I'm not hearing him complain about all those knockoff Netflix films that go direct to Netflix and like, I
don't see anybody complain about all these Westerns.
Yeah. Well, now you're stabbing Nicole in the heart.
I know.
Well, what I think he was trying, I think he put his foot in his mouth.
Oh, I do too.
Honestly.
I 1,000,000% think he thought he was like, he dropped the mic and then everybody was like, hey, Marty.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a little.
What I think what he was trying to say is that he's upset that it's become all people care about.
Yeah.
And that they're not open to other types of films. Or that they won't go to the theater to see something that isn't a spectacle. And movies are more than that, is all. Yeah. I think that's what he tried to say. But
he was trying, but then at the same time, he like friendly fired everybody, and like poor Chloe Zhao was like, so I just won an Oscar and said yes to this movie. What is happening? Like,
because and also like yucking our yum.
Well, and also it's like his contemporaries.
How I feel about that, Rolando. I'm like, let people like what they like.
Yeah. But his contemporaries created Star Wars. Steven Spielberg. Yeah. It shows that you can make art and also make a blockbuster franchise. So anyway, let's talk about some of the nitpicks we have with this film.
Okay.
I wish
I don't think I have anything at the
moment. You don't have any?
No, I was going to say I wish Namor's Speedo was smaller.
Oh, actually, I kind of... Okay, fine. This is like a very, very...
I can give you my mom's nitpicks and they made me laugh.
I wish he had a bigger butt.
Okay, thank you.
That would be my one thing. Namor has legs, But like, I just wish a little more booty.
Yeah.
You know, just pop a couple more squats or something. That would be my one thing. But God, he's so fine. He's so fine.
You know what my nitpick was, and I realized it in sitting there with my mom and sitting in the theater. They have where Marvel is now. It is truly comic books, right? Where it's like, if you want to pick up an edition, you'll enjoy it. You'll have a good time. But if you read none of the other titles around it, you were going to have literal moments where you go, I don't know what's happening. And that's where I felt bad for my mom, because there were moments where like where Julie Louis-Dreyfus was talking to Martin, and my mom just went, why are you fidgeting so much?
Because,
and I was like, because Mom, they're married. Can you believe it?
That was my reaction too. I was like, oh, they were exes? I didn't know.
Yes, and my mom's like, what is happening? Or she go, why does this man got feathers on his feet? And I said, Mom, because he's a mutant. And she goes, I don't, you gotta stop
for me,
to these.
All of those sequences with Martin Freeman and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I was like, why is this here? What is this serving to the film? And then at the end, it didn't ever get resolved.
Well,
so it was
he
just
got
like,
freed.
Now, but that's the thing. Like, these are, like you said, Rolando, they're more like TV series.
Yeah.
But for me, who likes to view them as films, or it's like, okay, as a film.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like that kind of...
Because you know what was funny? Is
I shouldn't be required to watch everything in order to enjoy it as a film.
Well, I kept thinking what was funny is I kept going, if they removed this entirely, I thought about like people like you, like my mom, like the people in the theater. I was like, if they removed any of these ties to the rest of Phase 4, people would be like, I really like that. I really enjoyed that. Like, because what I found funny is because my mom was like, what? She was like, why is Black Panther always so different? And I said, because it's the argument I once heard like Roy Woods Jr. make about Luke Cage, where he said, Batman, everybody gets to fight in other planets, all over the world, all over the country. He goes, Luke Cage does not get to leave one block in Harlem.
That's true.
And it's like, and that's what I said to my mom. I go, the wild part about Black Panther is they have been fighting the U.S. government and white people for 5 years now. Like, that's literally what I was like, because what's wild is you realize that like Namor, Killmonger, all these people, they're just the antagonists. The real villain they keep trying to lay out is like, people keep trying to come to this country and colonize it, and they have to keep fighting each other to be like, guys, we must stay focused. In the words of Dr. Omar, we must stay focused and keep it together. And it's like, and I think that's the funny part where, like you said, those moments that were nods to the rest of this comic book, you could feel my whole theater being like, what? Who?
Yeah.
Why are we in their kitchen?
Yes. No, I knew Julia Louis-Dreyfus was in something else because people in my theater reacted, but I was like, well, I don't know.
She's been in a couple of things.
Yeah, she's been in a couple things in Phase 4, and she has like not a standalone, but like a project where she is kind of like the Amanda Waller of her universe.
That's like her own Suicide Squad.
Well, I thought, like, I was like, is this a character from Veep entering the MCU?
First of all,
that would be cool.
I mean, that is how Julie Louis-Dreyfus is playing her, and I am here for it because I love that character. It's just like any chance I get to see some more Selena Myers on screen, I'm just like, I'm taking it.
But it was just a funny moment where I realized, like, everybody sitting around me was kind of like, what?
Wow, the Thursday night crowd was confused. That's funny.
It's funny because my Thursday night crowd was very much in, like, Northeast DC, like a majority black crowd that clearly was like we were all in white. Like, we came for a homegoing of our king, and then it was like, what is this movie? What is this movie in the way of the rest of my movie?
I think also Black Panther is going to get people to see it that don't necessarily indulge in every single thing that the MCU puts out. And I think that's why also Black Panther is so good, is because I think it's one of the better properties that they have out, and I think it works outside of the MCU. So
it really does. If you remove those scenes, it was still a good movie. If you keep those scenes in, it ties it to the rest of these projects. But if you take those out, you realize, like somebody said on my TikTok For You page, they were like, the thing this set up was Black Panther 3. They are not thinking about the rest of these people outside of this wall. They are dealing with their problems again, like Luke Cage. They are just trying to hold down this one block in Harlem while everybody else is like in galaxies and talking to aliens.
Which is very reminiscent of the early MCU, right? Like the early MCU was just that. They were just like these, like the Captain America story was tried to be a self-contained, well, I guess up until the second one, then it kind of like,
Then it got-
but you know what I mean? Like they were trying
weird.
to be self-contained
They were.
stories, part of a overall greater narrative. Now the narrative is so important because of how much has happened that like we get to a point where like it's just like, oh, if you missed something and you're out. And you know, I've still a lot of my friends keep asking me like, how am I not tired of like the Marvel stuff? I'm just like, I don't know. Like they figured it out. Once the TV show started coming, I could watch it at home. I'm just like, I'm in. They've hooked.
Yeah. Meanwhile, my mom is still like, I'm not doing this with you. She's like, just like we literally were sitting in there and she sees Jonathan Majors on screen for Ant-Man for Quantum Mania, and she just goes, now who are the rest of these people? And I went, Mom, she was like, is that Kang? And I said, yeah. And I go, but you know, we could watch Loki so you could know where she comes from. And she goes, I'm not doing that. No.
I saw Michelle Pfeiffer's in that, and I was like, oh, shit.
But she goes, oh, look, it's Bill Murray. Like, it makes me laugh because my mom goes, now at this point, like, she goes, it's also just these wildly famous people. She was like, because she goes, I love that it started with like the recovering drug addict and that guy who kept doing rom-coms were the only two people they could get to make these movies. And now all of a sudden we're at like Oscar winner Lupita Nyong'o and like comedy icon Bill Murray, Michelle Pfeiffer. Like she's just goes, it's gotten crazy.
That actually brings me to my two nitpicks of Black Panther is one, it's a little too long. Could have shaved off 5 or 10 minutes.
That man said that leaving our theater too. He just goes, that was a good movie. That thing was long as shit though.
It was a little long. And two, it needed more Lupita Nyong'o.
Oh yeah,
I
fine.
agree.
That's fair.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they could have shaved off some scenes, and then maybe had they replaced the scenes that they took out with Lupita Nyong'o, then I would say it was a perfect length.
You're like, we could take out all that like phase 4 connectivity, and we could, because I felt the same way about Riri Williams. It's like, I wanted a little bit more at MIT, because I'm like, I can't imagine how crazy that must be. I mean, we know we're getting a standalone show with her, but I was like, I wanted a little bit more of that Peter Parker moment of like seeing how extraordinarily brilliant she was at this campus in that way, because like they gave you that nod where she's like charging the people for their papers, but I just wanted like one more moment of her just being like, you know, building something else that I was like, what?
Yeah. I also, the moment that my theater reacted the most to was when Okoye was like, oh, Colonizer in Chains. Now I've seen everything.
We screamed. We screamed. All of Northeast DC just collectively was like, oh, the other one that like that I say a lot and my whole theater did was, you bald-headed demon.
Oh, that was a good.
That was one thing about M'Baku. He's going to give you bars every movie. He's going to give you one line that you cannot stop saying.
My theater liked that one too. Yeah.
This isn't my gripe, but I've heard it said on the internet a lot, which like, they're annoying. Are black men that feel like this is a very anti-black men movie. Weirdly,
no. Which
exactly. So
it's just like it's not anti. It's not anti.
And I think like what's almost really powerful and beautiful is like, I feel like especially this past few years, like we've been having a lot of conversations about like, how do you support black women and protect black women, and like it's all embodied in M'Baku, which is like you provide counsel, you provide protection, you give an ear, you're there, like, but you're not controlling, you're not commanding, you're not like, I'm the king, you little girl. It's like, I'm going to give you room and you decide. And okay. I also have to say my favorite moment that made me laugh was like Nakia just kept being like, so who did you see in the ancestral plane? Because you seem like real amped up. So like, who'd you see, buddy? And everybody's like, I don't think she saw her family because she is big mad.
And I just want to, like, you could raise women to excellence and stuff, and that's not necessarily putting men down. That doesn't make it anti.
Right. And I thought that was so strange that people like had that take, but I was like, that's because you can't process this idea. And I just love that he finally put the nod of like Michaela Cole's character and Io when she like brings her the food and she's like, thank you, my love. And I was like, yay, we finally got it. Yay, it happened.
The one gripe actually now in thinking about the film that I would have is in making the antagonist of the film, we end up seeing like this fight between two marginalized groups.
Let me tell you, that upset me to no end.
Yeah, like it is something, but it's also something that's just like real in like unfortunately minority groups.
Yes,
like there is like this hostility, especially in the Latino community. Like, right? Like, if you're Afro-Latino, you're perceived as sometimes less than. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it's not, I get it. I understand. It's true to life, but like, it would have been nice if we had like one villain that was not a marginalized representative group. That would be my one thing.
The same critique my mom and I kept saying was like, why the brown people got to fight each other? Like,
right, exactly.
Yep.
And again, I thought that whole speech with Namor talking to Shuri and literally saying like, yeah, all your things you're saying are valid, but like, do you understand if like the surface people, meaning everybody that don't look like us, the unmelanated folks, were having these conversations, they would not hesitate to take everything from us. And like, those are the moments, like you said, Nicole, when you're like, you got an antagonist saying some things, and I'm like, well, he's got a point. Like, there was a brief moment when he was like, we should team up and get rid of them, and you could hear my whole theater be like, well, I mean,
what a beautiful wedding that would be.
Yeah, we were like, not a bad idea, not a great idea, but like, I've heard worse. You know, it's like that brief moment where like fiction makes you pause, where you're like, oh, I just went to a really dark place, where I was like, well, we should think about it. We should consider.
Well, it looks like they're coming back, so we're gonna see more.
I mean, I can't wait.
People, so
I wonder. Namor's getting a standalone, isn't he? Film, possibly.
I
heard rumors.
Ugh, I don't care. I just want to stare at him all day.
All right, so closing thoughts. I'll kick it off. If this film doesn't get nominated for a couple of Oscars, I'd be shocked.
Yeah,
but like.
Not the technical ones. We're talking like the important.
Yeah,
we're talking about like the quote unquote real ones, not the.
Well,
ones.
I think that it needs to get nominated for best score, because the music was just wonderful for this film. And my mom, who's actually over here, just literally called out, yes, so because like the music really, I think, helped transcend this to also just feel different. It didn't feel formulaic or like every other cut and paste music. And of course, Angela Bassett. So, But for the third one, more Lupita Nyong'o. Those are my closing thoughts. Well, maybe now that, she has a son, so she'll have to be in it more. Yeah.
For my close, I don't know. It's exciting. Like, it's just like, it was a nice feeling to just see the Mesoamerican culture like being represented on screen, and just kind of having that feeling of just like, this is so awesome. I've never seen this before. I felt like a little kid. You know what I mean? Especially when you think about like the Atlantis myth. It's so Greek, right? I want to say it's Greek, right? I think it's Greek, or Greek, maybe Roman, I don't know, Western, and like to turn that on its head and make it like a Mesoamerican like culture and stuff. It felt cool. I felt not necessarily seen, because I technically have more Incan blood in me, but that's just. But it was awesome. I felt like it's just like, this is. I understand why Asian community rallied when they saw Shang-Chi. I understand now why the Black community rallied when they saw Black Panther, and like I get it now. I'm like excited for a Namor standalone project, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Nicole. I think Shuri had one of the greatest scores used to introduce a superhero I've ever seen. That thing went so hard, because they did such a great job of mixing that specific T'Challa score with this kind of like new synthy kind of. They mixed both Killmonger and T'Challa very well in like because Killmonger always had this very like Bay Area synth, like 808 kind of beat to him, and there was a regalness to T'Challa, and they combined it to make her. I'd say my big thought was like, being Black, it's dangerous, but it's lit, and like this movie just was like Black women, and I was just like, wow. Imagine not being a Black woman. Couldn't be me. Could not be me.
Yeah.
Well, also, I think the two at least biggest movies, like box office wise, were two sequels that people did not think were gonna be all that good. And that kind of like changed Top Gun Maverick. And this.
The greatest movie ever made? Don't even start about Top Gun Maverick. How dare you? Don't get me started again. I rented out the theater in my building to watch it on Memorial Day.
I just worked at an event where they had a Top Gun party with a Tom Cruise.
I saw that on your Instagram and lost my mind.
Yeah. I was like, I want this
That
to be
was
my
a good
birthday
impression.
party.
He looked so much like
He
him.
was excellent.
He was freaking me out.
Are you sure? Was
Yeah.
it just him pretending to be an impersonator?
No,
So
definitely.
you
He was,
imagine?
his skin wasn't very wrinkly.
Can you imagine
but,
if Tom Cruise low-key was like, I just want to go around and see what people say about me when I'm not around, and he just
So
was
I
like
pretend to
pretending.
be
Pretending to be Tom
I
Cruise.
pretend to be a Tom Cruise impersonator.
Well, MacKenzie, we are. I mean, every time you're on, it's just we have the best time, and we love
Totally.
it when you come on so much. And we'll see you for Little Mermaid. But if you come back sooner,
I will
we would appreciate
be back.
it.
That's what I do. I insert myself on the show like I work here.
We couldn't be happier. We could not be happier. No, yeah. But guys, have you watched the latest Black Panther, Wakanda Forever? Let us know. Share your thoughts on our Instagram. Our handle is Remakes, Reboots, Revivals. You can also reach out to us on Facebook / Remakes, Reboots, Revivals, and drop us an email. We love hearing from you. Remakes, Reboots, Revivals @gmail.com. And we also have a hotline that I'm going to pass over to Nicole. Nicole,
Let me see if I can get it up.
what is that
All right.
hotline?
Our hotline is 862-248-2326.
That's
so
right.
give us a call.
Yes, leave us a call. We may play it on the air when we have enough of them and make a little collection episode.
Yes.
MacKenzie,
so we love those.
once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And this was, I had a great time. Great conversation.
Y'all are the best.
As always.
So, but until next time,
Stay unoriginal.